Thanks everybody for joining. Today is our Mondays at Noon series, where we gather as a community to talk about things that we think are interesting and that our students will benefit from. Today is our careers in operations and supply chain management conversation, and we've got an excellent group of panelists that are going to talk to us about the incredibly varied world and incredibly in demand world of careers in operations and supply chain management. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Date so he can start the conversation and introduce our panelists, and then I'm going to moderate the room. I'll ask you to send questions to the chat, and if you've got questions for our panelists, and so yeah, Ashish, would you take it away, please?
Yes, welcome, Richard. I see you. Glad you're able to join. Thank you everyone for joining today's Careers in Operations event. Welcome everyone. I'll start with introducing the panelists with a brief bio about them, and then we'll begin with the questions for the panelists. So a little bit about the panel members. I see two familiar faces, that is Richard and Kennedy, who were in my classes. So I'll go ahead and introduce them. Just a little bit of note, anything shared by the panelists during the session is based on their personal experiences and not on behalf or in representation of their current or previous employers. With that, I'll introduce Matt McCoy. Matt is a Director 2 Implementation Solutions at Liberty Mutual Insurance. He attended the University of Idaho and received his MBA in Operations and Technology Management from the University of Portland. He has over 15 years of experience in project management, in operations management, and Lean Six Sigma and process improvement, including hiring, coaching, and managing projects, both large and small, and also in analytics. Then we have Kennedy Donnelly. She's starting as an intern at Boeing in 2016. Kennedy is now a program manager for the International Strategic Partnerships Organization within the Boeing Defense, Space and Security group. In her current role, she is responsible for managing program finances, developing projects with industry partners, and ensuring that Boeing is meeting their industrial participation obligations. She started in a leadership development program in which she held positions in contracts, finance, corporate audit, and international program management. She earned a Bachelor of Business Administration degree with concentration in operations and supply chain from Gonzaga in 2018. She also holds a minor in psychology and certificates in leadership, project management, and Lean Six Sigma Green Belt and neurodiversity, and is currently working towards her MBA with concentrations in international business and strategic management from Villanova University. Welcome, Kennedy. Welcome, Matt. And then moving on with Richard Pfluger. Richard is currently a senior strategy analyst at Boeing. And prior to that point, he spent time on a competitor intelligence team and was also in the leadership rotation program. He earned a Bachelor of Business Administration degree with a concentration in operations and supply chain, as well as international business from Gonzaga in 2017, and has furthered his education through various certificates focused on strategy, leadership, both from MIT as well as Cornell. Outside of work, Richard enjoys traveling and hiking. Welcome, Richard. Glad to see you. Moving on with Marci. Do I see Marci? Yes, Marci. Welcome, Marci. I'll just introduce her. After a long career in project management at STCU, Marci's current role is Director of Project Management Office at URM. She holds a Bachelor of Business Administration degree from Central Washington University in 2000 and Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership from Gonzaga in 2011. She has various certificates in project management field, and she has an in-depth experience with managing diversified portfolios of projects that are strategic and non-strategic cross-functional projects and are critical critical roadmap items, technical, compliance, operations, or maintenance in nature. Welcome, Marci. Moving on with our last panelist for today, and that is Meg Miller. Meg earned her Bachelor of Arts degree from University of Washington and a master's certificate in strategic hospitality management from Cornell. She was the director of marketing and sales at Wake Up Call Coffee for 8+ years, and she held various positions at the Northern Quest Resort and Casino, including as the director of sales and strategic partnership, executive director of sales and marketing, and executive director of resort operations. She's currently working towards her MBA in the American Indian Entrepreneurship program at Gonzaga and is preparing to begin a PhD this fall. With that, I welcome everyone. Let me see if Sarah is here. Is Sarah there? Okay, so I will continue with the questions. So we'll go ahead with the event is planned as such 50 minutes of Q&A with the panelists, our beloved and esteemed panelists, and then we'll open the last 10 minutes for audience Q&A if any audience have questions. So I'll go ahead with the questions. And we can go in any order, meaning anyone can take any that question, or we can just all of you can take in sequence that question, answering that question. So we'll go ahead with that. So the first one is, what motivated you to choose a career in operations? And so that's one part. Like, what motivated you to choose a career in operations or a concentration in operations, and how did you end up in your current position?
I can speak.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marci.
Well, so I got my undergrad in finance, and so I originally thought I was going to go more of kind of a financial advisor type route, and then ended up that was kind of what motivated me to get my foot in the door at the credit union. But then being able to watch the diversity that happens more in an operational type position, and especially with project management, getting to see the diversity of work that they get to do with the diversity of stakeholders that they get to work with, all the way from the CEO down to, at that point in time, with the tellers, making the tellers' jobs more efficient. And so that was very intriguing to me, and that's how I found my way to project management. And I think if you ask any project manager, did you intend to be a project manager? The answer is always no. They just found their way down that career path. And so that definitely is true for me as well.
Yeah, I think I'll lead into that. I'm now a project manager in my current role. And I think the way I found myself in that position is because I really love understanding all facets of the business. And I like knowing what's going on in finance, what's going on in supplier management, what's going on in manufacturing. I like kind of understanding all the pieces of the puzzle that make up our business. And as I got into Boeing, I started having a variety of positions in those different support functions. And as Marci said, eventually I found myself in this project management role because I had this experience touching all those different pieces and knowing how to work with different stakeholders and to really execute different projects.
Thank you, Kennedy.
I'll echo, is like my background's project management. You don't intend to be a project manager. Like I work in Liberty Mutual, no one intends to work in insurance, but like both are great choices. My undergraduate degree was in like foreign language and literature. So my first job was as a technical writer. And I was promoted to manage a logistics team. And as soon as I could, I took a job at another company as a marketing copywriter, like insisting that I thought I could write. And the company did Six Sigma. And so I did that training in project manager. I pulled right back into operations and decided that's my thing. I'm a much better operations professional than a writer, although maybe a better writer than a lot of like project managers. But that led to the MBA at the University of Portland, focusing on operations and technology management, which is what opened the door to the opportunity at Liberty Mutual, like getting me toward where I am today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to say one thing, I mean, when I started at, actually prior to Boeing, I worked at Nike in a factory for 2 summers. And that was probably the first piece. And it was, I mean, 12-hour work days. It was very much, you know, grunt labor. But it was absolutely informative and like why I wanted to study operations. So again, just a plug to kind of get going earlier on. And then like just to this day, I mean, what I use in corporate strategy, we do a lot of internal consulting engagements for our chief strategy officer, and project management is key. And we use that day in and day out, you know, not necessarily from a formal function, but everything you learn in class is something that we use all the time.
Thank you.
Great answers. Mine will be slightly different. I'm a person who really likes people, systems, and strategy. So spent the first approximately 16 years in sales, did quite a bit of project managing through the sales process and marketing specifically, but it was that pull towards systems dynamics and workflow charts. I was operationalizing my marketing. I was operationalizing sales and in charge of revenue management and strategy for the last 3 firms I worked for, which lend itself naturally to operations. And I was asked to become the executive director about a year into working at Northern Quest, and found that service operations was particularly well sort of aligned with my personality, enjoying creating experiences for people, and my sort of statistical thinking and better business through statistics and systems are absolutely non-negotiables for effective operators.
Thank you. I'll go with the second question. How has your educational background helped you in your career? I see different educational backgrounds as I introduce them. How has that educational background helped you in your past or in your current career or in your path towards where you are?
I'll share. So Liberty Mutual is a Fortune 100 company. So certainly, like, there's at some point where you've got to have like an MBA or some level of professional certification to continue. But I think at a more basic level, instead of like students looking, 5-10 years down the road at an MBA, you do get, I think Meg had mentioned, some of the statistics, the analysis, like the data-driven decision-making, which is key to success in almost any operations role. So that's where I'd really focus in terms of like where the MBA really helped me is like data-driven decision-making.
I agree with Matt in that the MBA, and I'm just wrapping up my MBA at Gonzaga now. It's amazing. But doing it 20 years into my career was really effective for me because it allowed me to take sort of my foundation to another level. But sort of going backwards in time, I chose to go to Cornell about 10 years into my professional work because I knew there were gaps in my understanding of how operations work and how to operationalize strategy. So did research on what were some of the programs that were great certifications that would take me 18 months to 2 years to complete, and could give me very narrow focus on Porter's, Porter's analysis and SWOT analysis and systems thinking, and was able to curate a program that was helpful there. So the education intermittently throughout the career, but also just day to day, smart can't short circuit wisdom. Wisdom is earned. So I think being willing to have a put me in coach attitude and learn from everybody with whom we work and all of our customers is the most important learning that we have. As somebody who's going into academia and loves it, seek to learn from every person with whom you interact.
I went the organizational leadership route through Gonzaga, and it actually complemented my undergrad in business administration and finance quite nicely. And from a project management perspective, there's every facet of leadership that you can imagine, probably more so than we bargain for at times. And I've just been able to leverage so much that I learned within that organizational leadership route. That was a good choice for me.
I think for me, I still touch back on my undergraduate education a lot. As I mentioned, I work really cross-functionally in my organization with finance, supplier management, operations. So really all the classes that I took as an undergrad have been really valuable in helping me connect with other functions in our organization. So I know there's classes right now that you all might not see how they're relevant, but I can tell you that all of them are somehow at some point in your career. And I wish when I was an undergrad that I had really taken advantage of that cross-functional learning more, because for me, going into a company like Boeing, there's so many career opportunities that you can take advantage of. So having that diverse skill set and being open to new experiences, I think really opens up the doors to tons of careers that you might not even know exist yet. So I would just say, make sure you're taking advantage of those undergraduate classes that you're involved in, because I do think they always have a way of coming back and being useful.
Yeah, I think Kennedy hit it spot on. The Gonzaga education is really unique in that, where you get, interdisciplinary focus across marketing, operations, finance. I mean, I did not like, coding and going through the, MIS type area, but it's been immensely helpful as of the past year. And that's one thing I've had some of my leaders in the strategy and corporate development organization call out to me of how unique of a background I've brought indirectly or directly. And I've certainly attributed that to the Gonzaga education that we've had, because you hear so many folks at other universities that if you only want to focus on marketing, you're only going to do marketing classes, or maybe 90% of your time, or only operations. And so I think that the Gonzaga education, even if you focus in operations, you have the bandwidth or the power to focus on other areas, which has been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Richard. Moving on with our next question. And this is an important one, especially for undergraduate, juniors, seniors who are deciding on operations, or if they'd like to know more about what are the different career paths one can take within operations. A few of them were mentioned. Project management was mentioned. Six Sigma was mentioned. So the next question ties into that. What are the different career options or paths within operations one can take that you may have heard, or your colleagues may have are into it? So what are the different career paths within operations that one can possibly go into as a career choice, if those who are in the operations concentration?
I'd pitch the broad base, like operations management, like maybe small to medium sized companies. It's a Swiss Army knife kind of job, where you cover a lot of ground. So it's kind of all of the above when you think about what skill sets are needed. At a certain scale, I mean, the one career path I'd add is like workforce management, which is maybe a forecasting and scheduling activity in a manufacturing world that students are more likely to hear about. But any like call center, any sales organization, in insurance, the claims organization, it's all about like forecasting demand and trying to staff the people to provide that service at the right time, which at any scale is a tremendous operational challenge. So there's a lot of like interesting career opportunities for like analytics minded operations students out there.
So appreciate that. I wrote down revenue management and forecasting, because that's the key for every single department's success. If you can't forecast by segment and distribution type, what's kind of customers are coming in, you're going to have poor guest experiences, customer experiences, and you're not going to hit your profitability metrics. So couldn't agree more.
I jotted down, in addition to what you've already mentioned, those are all great items. I also jotted down product management and business analysis were a couple others that I was thinking of. And I think either of those actually goes to what Matt was saying too. It's really just that broad disciplinary that can be relevant in any type of profession, really.
And we also have procurement and planning and scheduling and materials management, supply chain management, or project management itself, or process improvement, wherein we apply some of the lean principles that we look at in the classrooms, etc. So all of those are different great career options, either part-time, meaning internships, or full-time positions. Thank you, everyone. I'll move on with the next question. What do you recommend college students do in order to prepare for a career in operations, such as would it be work experience in organizations, or a part of maybe an internship or something, get their feet wet in the corporate world, or would it be pursue a master's degree, or any kind of a training or certifications? I know Richard has some certifications, and some of you have great certifications as well. While in school or after graduation, within once they are, I know most of the organizations have these budgets for continuous improvement, continuous training, certifications, master's programs, MBAs, etc. Or would it be study abroad while they are undergraduate to gain some global exposure, something like that, or gain some special soft skills such as communication skills or presentation skills, or maybe teamwork. Or some extracurricular activities also would be useful, or would more of a leadership kind of be useful, or any other experiences that you can share? So what do you recommend college students do in order to prepare for a career in operations? That's the question.
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at this. I think twofold for me, or at least I would recommend. One is some of the best leaders I know at Boeing and just outside of Boeing too have incredible presentation skills, whether it's operations or not. And you don't have to be, that's not necessarily memorizing the script, but being able to influence others, being able to pull in others, especially myself, early to mid-career, being able to pull those that are, 20 plus years older than me and help motivate them along in a consultant project is incredibly useful. So those presentation skills, those people skills are great. But then just at the tactical level for all you guys, especially, freshmen or sophomores, you don't have to go for this big audacious goal of interning or working for a company your sophomore or junior year that's like, the pinnacle, like the Apples of the world, that are just doing incredibly successful work, right? And their stock price is just through the roof. But just taking a step back of, the pillars that will bring you into that job one day, right? So for me, I started off as an intramural ref. And then from there, I worked at Nike, living in a factory, just doing factory work. I interned in the project management office at Gonzaga. And you start step building and you'll get yourself there. So that's how I like to think about it, rather than you need the perfect job or perfect internship in the start, because you need that small experience. And then at the same time, you don't need to have like a massive, you're saving the company $10 million or even $1 million, right? Maybe it's like, over the course of the summer, you help implement a process that saved the company $10,000, right? Something that's achievable, but that you can build up to. Because I know Kennedy and I help out with some of the Boeing interning events, and it's very clear when folks have maybe embellished the resume a bit much, and you really can see have you really done that? Like, I haven't even done that in my career, right? So those would be my two things I would bring up.
Yeah, I really resonated with something Meg said earlier. And I guess the best advice I could give is just to be patient. I do think you get so much more value out of that master's degree, for example, with some professional experience under your belt. So I would definitely recommend, waiting a few years to really dig into that secondary education or that higher education. And I think Matt touched on it earlier. If you land in a good organization, chances are they're going to help you pay for that. And that's a great benefit to have. And then from a certification perspective, me personally, I do look for those types of things, but it's going to be more in a senior level type position. Kind of what Richard was just saying, if I have a resume across my desk and it's loaded with certifications in education, but there's not a lot of professional experience there, then I'm probably going to assume there's a gap in what I need there. And also from a certification perspective, a lot of times if you have your bachelor's degree or your master's degree, you're going to get credit towards what you need to, what's required for that certification. So I can mostly speak to the arena of project management certifications. You have to demonstrate so many hundreds of hours in order to even be approved to sit for the exam. Well, if you have your bachelor's degree or your master's degree, that will help you minimize what those hours required are. So I just, be patient and, take your time with some of those next opportunities and really just get your foot into an organization and really get some good experience.
I do think there are some things that you can be doing right now while you're still in school. While I was at Gonzaga, I always had a work study job or I was part of an extracurricular activity. So while I was at GU, I was the president of GUSR, and I was involved in that for all 4 years. And it was really like being a project manager, and it was kind of my first management experience. Even though it was informal and it was part of a student organization, it still gave me a lot of skills that I was able to then bring into my interviews with companies. And so if there's something that you're passionate about on campus that you want to get involved in, I think there's so much value into taking advantage of those opportunities because they do add to your professional experience. And I think for me, some of those opportunities helped me connect the concepts that we were learning in class to real world applications. So I could actually see like what we were doing in the classroom was relevant, or I was getting skills that I was able to then deploy over to the program that I was leading. So I think while you have time, if there's activities or groups that you can get involved in on campus, definitely take advantage of those.
Thank you, Kennedy.
To that, all those great answers, all I would add is personality. At the end of the day, people run operations. And when I started out in business, social media was my Yellow Pages ad and upper right-hand read and what is my infographic. And now TikTok is all the rage, and it didn't exist a couple of years ago. So having a great personality and making it so you authentically present yourself so culture and fit can be understood and understand what's important to you. If sustainability matters to you, align yourself with a company that focuses on sustainability. So being yourself and then really focusing on communication skills, because business changes. It's going to change more quickly as it gets more and more digital. So focusing on how you can become the most effective communicator with whatever great quirky personality you can bring to a corporation.
Thank you, Meg. We'll move on with the next question. All great answers. Now, time for reflection. So looking back at your career path, college experience, studies, what would you do differently, such as choosing another program of study that you thought or that you think I should have done, or adding another concentration, or acquiring specific degrees or qualifications or skills? Is there anything that looking back at your career path or your college experience or your studies, what would you have done differently, or what would you do differently?
I'm embarrassed to say this. And I don't regret doing the master's in organizational leadership, and I still pull from that daily. But I still have a little twinge in me that wishes I would have went the MBA route. So, and for different reasons, if I could have done both, there's that, but definitely at that point in time in my life, one path was all I could manage. But I do have moments where I would have wished that I would have gotten my MBA.
Thank you, Marci.
Yeah.
I didn't really have something that I would necessarily change, but I think something that's important, I touched on it a little bit earlier, is kind of knowing what you're passionate about. And I think Meg was alluding to this earlier. Try to think about the things that get you excited and that you enjoy spending your time on, because those are going to be the things that can translate into what you do for work. I think when I was an undergrad, I was so focused on getting any job that I didn't really think about what type of company I wanted to work for. And I lucked out that I absolutely love Boeing and have grown to really love the products. But I didn't have an engineering background. I wasn't like an aerospace junkie. And so that's something that I've like acquired over time. And I do wonder sometimes if I had like pursued another company that was more aligned to some of my other interests, like where would I be now? Again, I love my job, so I'm not trying to change that, but I definitely think in today's environment, there's so many opportunities, and every company needs people. So don't just pick a company to pick a company. Like find a company that you really want to work for and that you believe in their mission, because I think you have that power to do that today.
Wow, really well said, Kennedy. All I could possibly add to that is I wish I discovered the power of mentorship and sponsorship sooner in my career. I'm at the midway point and completely gear shifting from the business side into academia, but understanding what mentorship meant and what sponsorship was would have served me really well in my 20s. I had a mentor basically that I didn't know was a mentor until a few years into my 30s. And she really helped shape my thinking and started career pathing me when before I was just working hard and checking boxes. So the power of mentorship, I think, is important.
I'll add, I love Kennedy's advice on selecting a company. I think once you're there, think about the next job. Like my two career regrets are related to like chasing salary or promotion. Once at a smaller company, I had 6 months where it turns out like I am not a salesperson. Like the money was good. I was like, I went for it, but 6 months in, like I just left. Like that wasn't my thing. At Liberty, I had a couple of years where I went for a job, like kind of a promotion, like feeling like I was falling behind peers, like kind of on the career ladder, and just kind of meandered through the desert for a couple of years, it felt like, where I should have been patient and waited it out, and probably a similar path like could have come with better work. So now I think about who's your manager going to be, what's the work going to be like, are you going to be learning something? I think it's critical, because if you're not going to be kind of challenged and learning in the next role, like what are you doing there? Salary might be nice, but it's not going to sustain you that long.
And I think,
Wow.
oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I'm similar to what a lot of you are saying, and more from a personal perspective, when you are really working hard to check the boxes, what are you giving up from a personal perspective? And I think if I could go back in time, it just would be really focused on what my true values and priorities are. And I probably gave up a lot of quality time, with my spouse or my children or what have you, because I was so focused on the career path that I think I would have made some different decisions if I could go back.
Yeah, those are all fantastic answers. The only thing I would add just from the education standpoint is I wish I had looked into more technical classes, technical meaning both from a finance or accounting, but also maybe even from like an engineering standpoint. And I can't recall if this was an offering during our time at Gonzaga, but indirectly or directly, you're going to be working with engineers, software engineers, mechanical engineers, accounting folks of some sort or capacity throughout your career in operations. And that's something that it has been a very difficult time for me to learn because I don't have that background with those classes outside of the couple accounting ones, but certainly on the engineering side. And so that's something that I wish I had taken advantage of if that opportunity was there.
Wonderful, insightful answers. I'm sure it'll be very useful. If I knew some of those answers or at least those inputs, well, I was an undergrad. that's great. Moving on with our next question. Describe your typical day at work. I know everyone is in varied backgrounds and different roles. And when reflecting on your typical day at work, what are your biggest challenges in executing your responsibilities that you see?
I'll kick this off because it's just relevant to what Richard just said. So in my day-to-day, I currently manage 10 engineering projects that we do in collaboration with Boeing and international suppliers. And I am not an engineer. So it is my responsibility to make sure that all of the stakeholders are executing to what we agreed to in the contract, that we're sticking on schedule, that we're within budget, and that we're meeting all these different milestones appropriately. And as someone that doesn't have an engineering background, I don't necessarily know the technical scope of the project that we're doing. I know what we're doing, but I don't know all the ins and outs. And so I have to build really good relationships with people to make sure that I understand the project well enough to pitch it to my leadership, to pitch it to our customer. And then I have to know all the ins and outs to make sure that the project is moving forward. And I would like to say that it goes off perfectly every time, but it definitely doesn't. And there's a lot of challenges. People change their positions constantly. So you're always trying to find the new point of contact that you're supposed to be working with. Sometimes the effort changes because we run into some difficulty that we didn't foresee. And so then we have to, redo our schedule, or we might have to change our budget. There's just a lot of unknowns in project management, and especially in the types of projects that I'm managing. So really just having to be flexible and really staying organized and on top of all the moving pieces. It's definitely challenging. There's some projects that I can turn out in like 2 or 3 months. And then I have a project right now that I've been trying to get approved for 2 years. So it's just kind of a ever-changing environment.
Thank you.
I can relate to everything Kennedy just said, but what I'll throw in the mix too is also managing staff. So you kind of, in my role, I've always had to balance between getting an opportunity to lead a project, and just by way of my experience, they tend to be the larger, more complex somethings. Right now, very technically focused projects for me, and I'm in a brand new organization for myself. So learning the communication, getting to know people, really being willing to just put yourself out there, not being afraid to ask questions. But then my other, 50%, if you will, is trying to build a PMO with, I've got 3 project managers on my team. They're not used to interacting as a team. So we've got a lot of team dynamics that we're trying to build, and then a lot of process and procedure. And so for me, my day looks like trying to be really attentive to these projects because they're very critical and important to the organization, but trying to, be a good leader, be a good coach, be a good mentor, and really try to just bring together the team and help my team manage their own projects as well. We've got a large portfolio of projects, and just making sure that my other project managers feel supported in what they're doing as well. So being very organized, I totally related to what Kennedy said there.
I appreciate project managers so very much. PMO offices are important. On more like an enterprise side, as the executive director in my previous role, I had about 1,000 employees and $100 million budget, and there was no day that was the exact same. However, in operations, you have to inspect what you expect. That means you have to know down to the statistical level what your KPIs are by each revenue center and or service center. So inspecting those and having a cadence of communication and being so that you're in best service of your customer and your organization is key. And then ensuring those non-negotiables are always taken care of, and paying attention through issue spotting if something comes up. Obviously, we just are in, hopefully the exit of a pandemic going into an endemic, but there's a lot in operations that you have to learn, and you have to be ready to do continuity planning, whether it's for something as large as a pandemic or something that could be weather-based or construction or project management based. So really being a communication chameleon and understanding what success looks like, both from a heart's level, right? Marci was talking about coaching staff and taking care of staff. That's most important, but then also at a business function level.
My fast answer to this, that my average day is like all meetings, but it's because of like recapping the other comments. It's all people, where I think in your learning in class, it's all like technical solutions to common business problems, which I think grossly oversimplifies what the real world is like. Where depending on the size of the organization, or even smaller ones, you have to work with a lot of people to just align on like, what are you going to accomplish? How are you going to measure it? How are you going to check in on it day to day? Which just generates a lot of like collaboration and interaction with people to get the work of operations done.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, and I think Matt kind of hit it off on a good note, is basically that you're going to have each day probably being very different. But for me, it's, just picking up the phone, figuring out who needs to be involved in an engagement, who has the right data, or what we think might have the right answers. And then just, continue to check in with the project sponsor or the executive focal, whoever it might be, to ensure that, what the work that you're doing is on the right path. But each day is different. So people.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Valuable inputs. I'll move on with the next question. When you or your company hires new graduates, what are you most looking for in their resume or at the time of the interview? So when you or your company is hiring new grads, what are you most looking for, either on paper, on their resume, or at the time of the interview?
For me, I'm actually trying to hire a project coordinator right now. I would say two things that stand out for me. One, from a resume perspective, and it's not bad that I'm getting these types of resumes, but I'm almost seeing probably overqualification in the resumes. And where I really, for a coordinator type role, I'm really hungry to get kind of more of a green, hungry, self-starter, self-motivated type individual. So I do get a little bit nervous if I say looking for something on the lower level and that resume just feels overqualified, and trying to balance that is a little bit tricky. And then from a interview perspective, did they do their research on the company? And you can ask some pretty simple questions about the company and frankly, even the position, to really know if they've done their due diligence in, the position that you're offering at the company that you're at. And so I have hired in the past where I really wished in the interview process, I had asked them to write me an agenda or draft me a project charter, really what I was probably taking for granted as really simple concepts in project management. They had completely sold me in that interview process. And when I brought them in and we started to dig into that first project, it was very apparent that we were missing some big basics from a process perspective.
I'll add, I think Richard hit on this earlier, where you don't have to have like big hits in your resume. It could be smaller process improvement kind of thing. So as you're coming out of school, maybe you don't have a lot of work experience, but anything that you've built, like in your college experience and an internship and a volunteer role, anything you've built, any process you've improved, know what it is, articulate it, put some metric around it. And at least for our interview process, like many companies, we do behavior-based interviewing. You could Google most of our questions, Google behavior-based interviewing, have your situation, your action, what you did, and what the numerical result was, and you're going to knock it out of the park. You just have to have a couple of examples under your belt. So whatever you're doing, lean in, focus on it, try to make it better, and you're going to build out some resume examples.
I love that Matt brought out STAR. study how to respond to questions with the STAR method. I would say a great attitude and somebody who asks good questions. The hallmark of a great operator in my mind is somebody who's curious and is willing to learn and eager to learn because things change so often. So great questions in an interview.
I agree.
I also think it's okay if you don't necessarily have a strong understanding of everything that the company is going to ask you to do, but the more you can demonstrate your willingness to get after something, to be open-minded, to figure out how to solve the problem, I think goes a long way. I got a job in our audit organization without any audit experience whatsoever. And I went back to the hiring manager and I asked them why they hired me. And he said, because you Googled what audit practices were before your interview and you came to the interview telling me what they were, even though you had absolutely no idea how to do it. And to me, it was really basic. It was like, well, if I'm going to interview for an audit job, I should probably do some research on what that might entail. And that's what I did. And it helped me get the position. So I think, yeah, what Marci said, just make sure you know what the role is that you're applying for and do your homework before you go into that interview.
Google and YouTube, those two tools alone are so powerful. I mean, even from a project management process or even studying for your PMP, you can find so much information through YouTube. It's absolutely amazing.
Wonderful answers. Looks like we are running short on time, but we'll proceed with our next question. I'll combine two questions into one. And that is both about continuing education. So the question goes as, once employed in an organization, how important is continuing education? And I know several of you have several postgraduates and certifications, etc., such as pursuing a master's, a certification in Six Sigma, or and then the second part of it is how important are professional certifications? I know Richard has several certifications in strategy, etc. Any professional certifications. So the question is, once employed in an organization, how important is continuing education? And that ties in masters, certifications, etc. All of those.
I'll take my first answer before Meg comes with her PhD coming in soon, because she'll blow me out of the water. But with my certificates, I would say they've been really helpful. I mean, I've been questioned on them by some of our senior leaders about how they were and kind of what I learned. Folks are always kind of curious as you go through the process. But I would say they are only important, at least in my experience, and folks that have also gotten their master's or their doctorate degrees at Boeing, is if you can balance your job at the same time, right? So if you're going to go on that process, and if you're going to slack on your job or you can't fully commit, then it's not the right time, or it's not the right, because in my personal belief is if that's what you're getting paid day to day to do, and you're trying to use that further education to either benefit you there or in the future. So if you can't do those both collectively great at the same time, then it's probably too much on your plate. But otherwise, I think they're fantastic to do.
Just going along with another Boeing perspective, I think something that people confuse is that more education equals promotion always, and that's not necessarily the case. Continuing your education should be an investment that you're making in yourself because you want to continue learning and fill a skill gap. I think too many people go and get these extra degrees thinking that it's going to lead to more money or a new promotion, and that's just not always the reality. So before you commit that time and make that investment, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. And I do think that those benefits will eventually be realized, but maybe not in the amount of time that you expected it to be.
Yeah, I can add to that. It's just simply demonstrating that you've got a growth mindset, and you live kind of in that world of being a continuous learner. And you can do that from really small scale type things to really large scale type things. For me, getting the PMP, I think, was an absolute requirement. That's kind of the basic, most known certification in project management. But then when I was going for my portfolio management and then my Agile certified certification, that's just because I was generally interested in how those types of certifications could benefit me in the roles that I was already doing. And completely what Richard said, you have to be willing to do a lot of that on your own time and, you know, not really have it impact the job that you're doing for the organization.
That's so well said. And somebody who loves formal education, I think informal education is also important. We had a library at my previous 2 organizations that I actually started so that people could come in and grab business books. I had book clubs, so I could see who was curious about different topics. So I think informal learning, literally sitting down and having lunch and learns like this with Dr. Stevens, where we're convened here learning from one another, I think is important. And to Marci's point, just having that growth mindset and being extremely curious.
I'm just gonna say +1 for growth mindset. It's not like the certification, it's the approach. And for the students out there, that's a book that you can find and read and help set you on the path to be a lifelong learner.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Last couple of questions before I open it up for the audience questions. A reminder for the audience, if you have any questions for our esteemed panelists, please type them in the chat, or you can chat that you can send a chat message to Chris or myself. Moving on to the next question. If you were a student in with a concentration in operations and supply chain today, what skill sets and topical knowledge, could be hard skills, soft skills, technical data, would you pursue to increase your job prospects and career advancements? So if you were a student with a concentration in operations, supply chain management today, what skill sets or knowledge would you pursue to increase your job prospects and career advancements?
I had to say one, it would be Tableau. At least just for my day-to-day job, it's taken off, and it's amazing the senior leaders in the company that are just flabbergasted what you can do with it. Even if it takes you a couple of days to build something, they think it took you a year. So Tableau.
Or Power BI, or maybe
Yeah.
SAS. If I could go back, I think I'd learn one of those. And I think I learned R in my MBA program, and like that one's not as applicable. But if you can take some data, like some analytical power, and like package that up and put that on your resume, I think that would be huge. That's what I would do.
I think any depth of knowledge or experience, even with the Office 365 suite, I mean, there is so much you can do with those tools, and a lot of organizations, that's a tool set they've already invested in.
Yeah, mine maybe a little not unpopular, but if I was still a student today, I'd really just focus on what your classes are providing you and figure out get into your first job and see some of those skill gaps that you're going to need, because the needs are always changing and there's always going to be something new for you to learn. So I personally would prioritize like what you're doing right now in classes, in your extracurriculars. And as you have time, maybe you start learning a new skill. But if I could go back and focus on my MIS class that we took at Gonzaga, or the Excel class that we had, I probably would have invested a little more in the moment. Oh, sorry, my dog just did something. I would have invested more in the moment to learn those things then while they were being taught to me than having to like relearn them at a later date.
Oh my gosh, Kennedy, with the presence sentence, that's perfect. Being present with what is being learned and in front of them right now. The only thing I would add to that, which I think is an incredible answer, is communication. It sounds silly, but at the end of the day, a lot of what we do, Tableau, all of these great data visualization platforms we're talking about, more and more is going to become automated and digitally mediated. And it's going to be more our human interaction that's going to matter, because computers are going to do a lot of those, analytical functions for us. So people.
Yeah, I would piggyback on the communication. One thing I had jotted down is just your willingness to have the hard conversation. And it's so important that you're willing to do it in a timely fashion.
Great answers. Do we have any questions for the audience? We'll open it up. I haven't received any on the chat. Has anyone, has Chris received any on the chat? Otherwise,
I've got one. I've got one, Ashish, from the audience. How has working from home changed your career, and how do you think working from home will affect the future?
I'll start. So my company, Liberty Mutual, is based in Boston, owns Safeco based in Seattle. So there's a large office in Liberty Lake. However, I was mostly remote. This has leveled the playing field. So personally for me, I'm like on par with the folks in Boston, Seattle for competing for the same types of jobs. So it's opening up opportunity for more people across the country. So I look at it from that lens.
I work largely from home now because of COVID, and I work virtually anyways because most of my stakeholders aren't in my immediate area. So the biggest thing that's changed for me is now I'm just working at home instead of in the office. And I will admit, I really miss the office. Even though I didn't work with people in the office necessarily, I just miss the community and the side conversations that happen. I also got a dog during COVID, and so now I feel tied to stay home, which kind of will limit the types of jobs that I'm considering maybe in the future. And I hate to admit that, but I've gotten used to this like work from home schedule, and now it's like breaking out of that and having to figure out a new schedule to get back into the office, which I never thought I would have to do. But I definitely miss just the office environment and being around people.
I think for me, where I don't know if it's that I feel conflicted. I need to be in the office. I don't have the bandwidth where I live to allow me to be productive and efficient in the ways that I would prefer to be. So it's an easy answer for me to come into the office. But where I will say that I've personally struggled, and at both companies I've been at, when you've got some staff preferring to be in the office and some staff that prefer to be remote, and really kind of forcing yourself to find what that balance looks like when you've got individuals in your face, and it's easy to give them the attention and the coaching and the partnerships and things because it's there, it's convenient, we're all seeing each other, and then remembering like, oh man, we need to get so-and-so involved because they're preferring to work remote. So it's a little bit difficult from a leadership perspective, but I'll flip it and say, it's been really cool to see companies that have been willing to leverage what they've learned through COVID and allow staff to stay remote. I think in so many ways, staff were able to show their ways or their examples of how they can still do their positions from afar. And so I have enjoyed seeing companies trying to find what kind of that new normal looks like. But I do think it's going to be a hybrid model and really trying to find where you can be effective in that way.
Yeah, Marci brings up a great point. My team's going to be permanently remote because we're based all around the country. So kind of similar to what Matt's experienced, it'll be a different challenge for us. But at the same time, it's making that time together. So we're going to get together quarterly, various locations across the country, and making that time intentional where you're fully devoted to being with them. You're not doing email on the side. You're not hopping on the phone with your significant other in the heart of a meeting, whatever it might be. Where you actually spend those 2 or 3 days together and you really get to know one another. But it has also provided the benefits. I mean, I save a couple hours on commuting each day and getting ready and all that. And so not that I'm getting paid for a 12-hour workday, but if I want to have a 12-hour workday and if I need to have one, it's much more comfortable to do that here than having to, go in the office and staying there late at night.
It's changed. Zoom has changed the competitive landscape in this really tight labor market. And I think organizations are going to have to really define what essential and non-essential mean. It's words that were created from the pandemic, and we're going to continue to have to explore what those mean. and how we set our missions and create corporate culture within a hybridized model. So I think there's many challenges ahead. And my only concern, and I would ask all of us as business students and leaders, is to remain focused on issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion, because so often women right now have left the workforce in greater percentages than men based on the pandemic, and traditionally marginalized groups often have a harder time getting bandwidth, kind of to Marci's point, if they're in rural areas like much of Native America. So I think we're going to have to be more intentional as business leaders to focus on DEI in a hybrid environment to ensure that we have, healthy and appropriate corporate cultures moving forward.
Well said. Thank you. Actually, we are already over time, but I'll end with the last one question for our students. One piece of advice to the students, and we'll end that with that question. One piece of advice to our students.
I really liked what Richard had said way earlier in the meeting, and I had actually jotted it down as my piece of advice. Don't be afraid to get your foot in the door at a lower level position, even with your degrees in tow, because most companies prefer to promote from within. So if you're willing to do, if you've got the accounting degree, I'll just use my credit union background. We saw it so many times. You might have your accounting degree, but you need to start as a teller, just because that just so happens to be the position that was open. There's just so much opportunity to promote from within. So don't hesitate if you're seeing a lower level position, just to get your foot in the door, especially a lot with what was said in the call as well, especially if it's a company you're passionate about or their mission aligns with yours. That position that you prefer will come in due time.
Yeah, same. Be open to the job opportunities out there, take risks. And then once you're there, like do exactly what Kennedy said for your classes, like be present, like learn what you can, like make the most of it. If it doesn't work out, you can get another job, right? Like you're young enough, take a risk, try something new.
I'm a big believer of work hard, play hard. So, work your butt off, through the week, whatever you need to do, but also take time for yourself. Whether that's in the morning, throughout the day, whatever it looks like, but work hard, play hard.
I'll go with make sure you are doing something that aligns to your passion. You will spend so much time at work and for unfortunately a good portion of your adult life. So you really should do something that you're interested in and want to be giving your time to.
The only advice I'd add, because those are also good, is find publications that really help you understand the macro environment and economy, and read them constantly. Make sure you're constantly consuming really good newspapers and publications that'll help you be a better issue spotter and better operator.
Thank you for the very valuable inputs throughout the session. Thank you, Meg, Marci, Kennedy, Matt, and Richard. Thank you for your valuable time, and thank you for sharing your valuable experience with all of our students. I'm sure all the students learned a lot from today's session. With that, I will end this session. Thank you once again. And any of the audience would like to get in touch with our panelists, I would be happy to help you connect with them. Please reach out to me. I've almost sent out all of the current members as well as our attendees an email. So reach out to me, and I'll be happy to help you connect with them. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you for having
everybody.
us.
Thank you.
You will.
Bye-bye.